Hey, global citizen now. How are y'all? You really gonna let me sit up here and just be by myself with no hype from the audience? This is what we're doing today? Okay, I was just checking in on how we're doing. Excited to be here with a powerful, powerful group of, I'm not gonna call us fashionistas, I'm just gonna say we are alchemists of style and clothing and everything else under the sun. I have a really esteemed group of folks who have a perspective that is necessary in the world as we talk about the role that inclusivity needs to play in what we do with fashion and clothing. And I personally believe that it's not about the clothes, they're an armor for the way that you operate in the world. And so there's a lot that's changed. The luxury fashion industry has been built on exclusivity. Most of y'all would probably agree, but a lot has changed. It may not be better, but it's less worse. That wasn't on the cue card. That is my opinion, the opinion of the Caroline Wanga Corporation. But we know that there's a lot related to diversity that's happening in this world, and so I'm gonna start by engaging with Robin.
Hello.
Hi, Robin, how are you?
It's nice to be here.
We're honored to have you.
It's my pleasure.
You have almost 3 decades of being a journalist and storyteller in this thing called the fashion industry. You've observed a lot on what people call diversity and inclusion. Tell us about what your observations have told you.
Well, I mean, I think that over probably the last decade, the good news is that the part of the industry that is the most visible, I think, has become more diverse. And by that, I mean the public-facing models have become more diverse. But I think it's, the industry is a bit like an iceberg. The problem is that just below the surface, the people who are in the ateliers, who are in the corporate suites, who are making the decisions about who gets to walk down a runway, who's on the cover of a magazine, that has been much slower to change. And then I think if you look even more broadly than that, what we realize is that the industry is still very much Eurocentric. And the focus is on what Europe can offer the world, as opposed to looking at the ways in which the world sort of fuels the global fashion industry.
It's super interesting power dynamic, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's tilted it's still tilted, overly tilted in one direction, and I think we are not quick to try and balance those scales. And I include myself in that. I mean, I still tend to focus on what's going on in Paris.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different things that are shifting that beyond what we need to do just to catch up, we need to do to continue to innovate. And Alok, I'm gonna ask you to talk about degendering, which has been a big area of advocacy for you, and specifically within the fashion industry. What does that mean? What does that advocacy look like, and why is it important?
Why can't I exist in public without the threat of being attacked?
Okay, I need your mic closer and I need you to say it again slow so they can hear it.
Why can't I exist in public without the threat of being physically attacked? Why are people more comfortable with people who look like me on stages than on streets? It's because we've been advertised and marketed the illusion that beauty is just for one gender, and that there are things called women's clothes and men's clothes. So people look at me and they say, why are you wearing women's clothing? To which I respond, I'm wearing my clothing.
Yeah.
And what degendering fashion is about giving ownership back to people to determine what they mean to themselves, rather than the power to fashion and beauty industries and telling us this is what it means to look like a man or a woman. I think that there's as many ways to look like a woman as there are women. So I think, actually, getting rid of gender norms helps us all, because the uniform is not just an outfit, it's a mentality.
Yeah.
And we're taught from a young age that the only way that we can have value in the society is by conforming to what's been marketed to us. I think the paradigm shift I'd like to initiate in the world is rather than conforming, create, give birth to yourself, show me who you are on your own terms.
Love that. As I shared, for me, I consider fashion to be armor, and it's the armor to live out the purpose I was born to deliver in this world. How much more would I get done if whether or not what I'm wearing is male or female was not an issue? Sister Maria.
Oh.
How are you?
Beautiful.
You are the first Angolan supermodel. Do y'all know where Angola is? You better know where Angola is.
Do you guys know? Yes.
They better know. If you don't, Google it. The first African model to grace the cover of Elle magazine in the 21st century. And in 2015, you made history by walking the iconic Victoria's Secret runway with short, natural hair. How important is representation for you with your 16, she just had a baby 16 months ago. Do you see this?
Yes.
I had a baby 26 years ago, and I'm not looking like that. But let's talk about representation. What does that mean for you?
Definitely. I believe I was on the right time, and coming from where I come from, Angola, and being in the United States, trying to make a big and open door for many other women and girls that dream to fit on this industry that is so diversified, but we're still fighting for diversity. And as you well mentioned, Elle magazine just changed the game. And I was surprised that I was the first model in this center as African to be on the cover. But I did make sure that we don't need another 20 years to see another model doing that. And it was, they hear me. I think the universe was awake. And now, with a lot of activists and a lot of mentors that I have who's every day they fight for diversity in our industry. The impact has been made over the years, and I'm happy that I'll be following the same path. And I think we're all here for that, to make a change.
Yeah, and there'll never be another day where there hasn't been an Angolan supermodel on the cover of Elle. There'll never be another day.
But it's not easy to be the first, because it's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do without my mentor, my agent. I couldn't do without the community support. This is what makes me strong. I can't wait for another cover. Why not? Yeah. One more cover to come.
Yeah. You keep talking about your mentor. Do you want to share who that is?
Mentoring someone like you, someone like my lady on my right side, I feel like we have to live by example. Yeah. And I have a greatest mentor, which is my daddy in fashion, Edward Ennefu. And I feel like it's important as a young girl who came from the continent that model is not an official job. Yeah. It's like a part-time job. Yeah. It is important to come to the big industry and have this mentorship. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Reni, how are you, my sister?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. Them shoes, I'm just saying. Are they an 11? No? All right, we'll work on it. African creativity is historically excluded, misinterpreted, appropriated. The fashion industry is one of the biggest culprits of this. And tokenism is the other thing that tends to exist there. What do you believe needs to be done to protect the enterprises, the small businesses, from the appropriation that tends to happen from the mainstream fashion culture?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. Yeah, it's a great question. I think, first of all, the first thing is for us as people, as Africans, and our governments to value the importance of our creativity and our culture. It's from that value that everything else comes. So if you value what you have, you then want to protect it. And over the years, we've seen that the lack of value has caused for the culture to be exploited and for big fashion houses to exploit and take from us what is really our identity. Because African creativity is very much linked to African identity. There's no way that you can separate both. And a lot of designers, young designers, are taking from our traditions. They're taking skills from our tradition, taking things that have been done over the years. So it's a very intimate product, which should be protected. I think that going into the new world, of course, there should be copyright laws to protect individual designers. But more importantly, I think that cultural intellectual property rights should be protected by governments. I think that it sounds a little far-fetched, but it's very possible. It's being done currently in Mexico City, where where people can now, prosecute people who are taking their culture and using it inappropriately. So it holds people responsible, and it protects the culture and protects their intellectual property rights. So also to create institutions that sort of sit between Africa and the rest of the world, that are important and solid enough to be able to see what's going on and find a way to correct it at home. So I think that those are kind of the major things that I would suggest. Cultural intellectual property rights being the first most important thing that needs to be done at ASAP.
Can I add something to your list? Those of us that spend our money with those brands should be thinking very carefully if they get our dollar, if they are not giving the credit economically, culturally, and politically to the brands they stole it from.
Exactly. I mean, it's super important, and it's like you have your identity, you steal somebody's identity, and you make it yours. Like, at the end of the day, somebody has to hold somebody responsible for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that we have to find a way to impose,
Yeah. Our dollar can be an act of activism.
Sorry?
Our dollar can be an act of activism. Our money can be an act of activism. We can stop supporting brands that don't give the right cultural credit to where they got their ideas.
Exactly.
And they'll start to think differently when they ain't getting our money.
Exactly.
Robin, she talked about government and institutions that can play a role in bringing equity here. What do you think are some organizations that are playing a role in trying to bring equity to the way that fashion is created, sold, and economically profited from within different groups?
Well, I think certainly here in New York, there have been organizations that are attempting to really raise the awareness of, for instance, Black designers, Black business owners, organizations like the Black in Fashion Council, or certainly the 15% Pledge, which is aiming to get more Black entrepreneurs into major retailers and engaged in sort of the broader economy. But, I tend to think that, the organization, so to speak, that really can hold the industry accountable is the organization of consumers. They are ultimately the ones who decide what is valued, what sells out, what is allowed to flourish. And I think that oftentimes consumers, particularly within the fashion industry, don't really grasp how much clout they have. Because particularly as you go up to the top of the fashion pyramid, entrepreneurs aren't doing market research, right? They are deciding what it is that they think consumers should desire. And I think consumers can really take some of that control back. And that will ultimately push the industry to make significant changes.
Yeah, and the work as a consumer and those of us that are here that spend our money on fashion is going to feel uncomfortable when you start to change where you spend your dollar. That's an uncomfortable journey, but at the end of it is equity that benefits all.
And I would just add that we shouldn't underestimate the power of social media, because even if you are someone who is never going to buy a $5,000 handbag, you still have the power of social media to speak to that brand about what they're doing more broadly.
Yeah. Alok, you talked a lot about the way that you operate in the world. What are some of the things that you think corporations or citizens, institutions can do to increase what needs to be done in fashion?
I worry that people have forgotten why fashion is beautiful.
Remind us.
Fashion was the first vocabulary I had to articulate who I was on my own terms.
Say that again slowly and loudly for this room, please.
Fashion was the first language that I had to articulate who I was on my own terms. Fashion was where I got to experiment every day with a practice of freedom. Fashion was where I learned that I belonged to myself, not other people's expectations of who I should be. Fashion was how I learned that the greatest romance was returning to myself, not seeking the validation from other people. And I worry that what fashion has become is about marketing aspiration, not actually affirming what is. And I think is the most beautiful place to be, the most beautiful country. I'm a global citizen of is. And so what
Pun
I would like
intended.
to see fashion and beauty industries do is remember that fashion is an art, and that art doesn't need to be understood. Art needs to be experienced. And that those of us who are actually making fashion relevant again should not just be your mood boards, should not just be the people that you follow on Instagram to mine for inspiration, but should be your leaders. And I think that the history of the fashion industry has been one of exploitation and extraction, not one of meaningful collaboration. And so when I'm seeing drag laws pass in this country, criminalizing people like me for existing in public, and I'm not seeing fashion brands see that as a fashion issue, I think that's a problem. I think people should be able to wear whatever they want without fear of violence or criminalization. And I don't think that I should have to come on stages and beg for that.
So don't just call me on the side and tell me you don't like it. Do something about it. It's the vocabulary that gave you the opportunity to define yourself for yourself.
I imagine, think about how much money and tension and foresight was done to market the latest bag. What if we took that to market freedom? What if we harnessed the power of images to actually transform the world, not stabilize the status quo?
Yeah.
The reason I'm in fashion is because I understand that images speak at a deeper level than any word I can muster.
That's right.
And that I can reach people who might not think that they need to even speak to me.
Yes, thank you so much. Maria, I want you to also weigh in on what you think institutions can do. You talked about institutions like Elle, and then Reni, I'm gonna have you close us out with the answer to the same question. What do you think institutions can do to change the story of diversity in fashion?
Correct. They are already doing. I feel like if we're standing here today, it's because before us, there's a lot of people doing the same, and we have to all keep up with the same legacy. And as we all mentioned about 15% pledged, is doing amazing work and supporting Black designers and retailer brand, because those are the ones who need financial support.
Yeah.
And it's important to talk about financial support because I wouldn't be here if I did not invest in myself.
Yeah.
It's important to invest in ourselves so we'll be stronger to support our community and the world.
Yeah. Reni, you want to give the last word by giving your perspective on that? What institutions can do to change diversity in fashion?
I mean, a lot. I mean, and different types of institutions. I like to speak to governments because that's quite basic, especially because coming from Africa, it's important that we have the basic infrastructure and the basic support to be able to create. So for me, it's important that governments understand what the importance of creativity, what it will look like, for instance, in 2030, when the youth population in Africa, 1 billion, there'll be 1 billion young people available for work. What are they going to be doing? And the potential that the creative sector has in pushing the African narrative forward. So I would be speaking to African governments and governments of the African diaspora to find ways to strengthen the creative force and also to join forces, because together we are greater, and I do understand the importance of these connections, especially today.
Yes.
So I would be calling on governments. I mean, it's
makes
important,
sense.
of course, to create the basis for which investment can come. So
Absolutely.
Investment and financial, support from all over the world. But I think first of all, I think African governments should find a way to empower the creative group.
Understood. Ladies and gentlemen, Reni, Alok, Robin, and Maria, style alchemists, activists in the fashion industry, thank you for joining us.